Hi, I'm Jason Bellamy, coming to you from Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., and I'm joined by Dr. Alison Cernich, and we just finished a briefing on rehabilitation research. So let's first of all just give people a sense of the scope. When we're talking about rehabilitation research, what's the population this will ultimately affect?
So we're talking about 50 million people, upwards of 50 million people in the United States that have a disability, whether it's mobility, whether it's sensory, whether it's communication, whether it's thinking. Those are the people that we ultimately hope to impact, and the people who provide care for them, so another 43 million people in the United States.
So how far is rehabilitation research coming, and then the rehabilitation science and results that come from it?
What's been amazing is at the basic level, understanding plasticity, understanding how we regenerate tissue for people, understanding the models of disability at the animal level and the large animal level, so we understand how that impacts humans, and then translating that into actual treatments. So how are we dosing our treatments, how are we delivering our treatments, and how are we getting things out to people like devices or in-home therapies. So the reach is everywhere from the cell all the way out to humans and devices in the community.
So you provided some examples of ways that, say, stroke therapy might be used in a different circumstance, like sort of taking lessons learned from one area and applying it. Give me a couple of those examples.
Right, so one of the lessons that I talked about in the briefing was using constraint-induced movement therapy, which, as many people know, is a great therapy for people with stroke. It takes the paralyzed or the weakened limb, you make people use it, and you essentially restrain their use of a functional limb. It makes the limb plastic, and it makes it function better. We've extended that now, and we have investigators looking at that in cerebral palsy. So applying that to children that are very young, using modified approaches in order to make sure that we have that therapy available for kids with cerebral palsy, so that they have a weakened limb that's more functional as they grow.
One of the examples you cited was Cole Galloway's Go Baby Go, obviously a pride of the physical therapy community. When you look at that Go Baby Go project, what does that mean to you emotionally, and then also just in terms of the progress that needs to be made?
Right, so I think the key part that I didn't get to highlight just because of time was the involvement of the community in that research. So we're looking at the science of it, and I think what Cole's also done is he's engaged communities, not only children with disabilities, but communities that want to help kids with disabilities in order to make the cars, sponsor the cars, and get these things to the kids, and the partnerships he's building. So he's taken a very broad approach, a very novel approach, but what it really impacts is people have a personal connection, not only with the kid who they build a car for, but that child has that personal connection then to that community and other children.
There was a gentleman who told his story. He fell off a forklift. He suffered a traumatic brain injury. It ultimately took a lot of care to get back to re-entering the workforce, improving his goals, getting back to life the way he wanted it and beyond. It was a great example of how complex these problems are. So where are we in terms of where we need to be, and what are the next steps in terms of getting people better care like that gentleman got?
Right, so I think part of that is knowing how early can we intervene. We have a number of projects looking at that. How early can we introduce rehabilitation? Can we do it in the intensive care unit? How do we optimize it? So when do we deliver it? How intensely do we deliver it? And what do we deliver? And then finally, how do we perpetuate those effects? So how do we monitor it in the community? Was it sensors? Is it check-ins from an iPhone? We have different approaches that incorporate that. And we also look at, how do we keep people functioning? So when do they need to come back in for a tune-up, and how does that affect their function overall? So those are the sorts of things that we have research in various areas of rehabilitation, not just stroke, not just in brain injury, but also in spinal cord, in cardiac, in severe mental illness. They all benefit from rehabilitation. How do we make those translative efforts more broad, more transparent?
So last question, you mentioned that one of the things that needs to develop is that you need to get the next generation of researchers. Physical therapists would be one of those. So for people in the physical therapy community who are watching this, what should they do to support rehabilitation research moving forward?
So first off, think about a career in research. That's first. Because practice is important, research is just as important. If you don't have the evidence to suggest that what you're doing is worthwhile, you're not going to have the evidence that impacts your practice and reimbursement. The other thing is, if you can't do research, support research. Find ways to partner with scientists in your area to get people into trials, to help them understand the research, and to use the research evidence in your practice. Because that's ultimately what's going to drive a lot of the things that we do to make the evidence apparent in practice and show good outcomes.
Changing minds here on Capitol Hill and hopefully changing lives in the future. She's Dr. Alison Cernich. I'm Jason Bellamy, and I'll catch you later.